What's up, everybody? I'm Tim Metz, and a couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of getting to sit down and chat with Mr. Paul Francis, formerly of the Zildjian Company and now of Royal Cymbals and Cymbal Craftsman, to discuss what I thought was going to be the Zildjian Hi Bell line that they released a long time ago. Instead, oh my gosh, I had the best conversation with one of the greatest cymbal craftsmen, no pun intended, of our modern times. So I was going to edit it down and try and figure out how to make it all fancy, but you guys just got to hear this. So here we go. All right, well, I am so thrilled to be joined by the master cymbal maker himself, Mr. Paul Francis. He has so many years at his previous company and now has branched out to his own companies, Cymbal Craftsman and Royal Cymbal Company. So we're here to talk about some high bells. So before we do that, hi, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Tim. How are you? Thank you for asking me to be part of this today. This should be fun.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm just blown away that I get to talk to you about these things. So high bells are some of my favorite cymbals that you made at Zildjian. I feel like they're really unsung heroes of the Constantinople line. Could you talk about the process or like how they came to be?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna go back to how the high bell itself came to be. This was many years ago. I'm trying to remember. It was probably around 2003, 2004, and we got a phone call at the Zildjian Company, and there's a cymbal player with the Cleveland Orchestra who is now retired. His name is Joe Adato, and he was looking for some cymbals, and he really liked his colleague's cymbals. And I'm trying to remember that guy's name, and it will come to me. So his colleague wasn't the cymbal player, but he had some Zildjian cymbals. He was a Zildjian endorser, but he primarily played, in the percussion section with Joe Adato. So he had called up and said, "I really like his cymbals, and can you make some stuff for me?" And it was decided that me and Leon Chiappini, who is the head cymbal tester, he had worked at Zildjian since 1961, and he had worked with everybody. He had picked cymbals for Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and Papa Joe and Tony Williams. He worked with Tony. He worked with, Elvin and Louie and Steve Gadd and Vinny Caliuta, and the list goes on and on and on. So he was one of my teachers at Zildjian. So
that's some
so
history
we booked we booked a trip to Cleveland, and we got there and we went to Severance Hall, and let me back up just a little bit. We got to the airport and Joe was picking us up, and Joe didn't know us. So he held a sign up with my name on it. And, we come down the escalator after getting our bags and said, "Hi, I'm Paul Francis." And he goes, "No, you're not." And I said, "No, really, I am." He goes, "No, you're too young to have made the cymbals that my colleague has." Tom Freer, that's his name. Okay. Tom Freer, he doesn't play in the orchestra any longer. But Tom Freer had some K. Constantinople orchestral cymbals that Joe really liked. But he wanted something along those lines, but not what Tom had. So anyway, so he's telling me I'm not who I am, and I'm literally pulling out my my license to prove to him. And he was expecting some really old guy that had been making cymbals for a long time. So we convinced him I was who I said I was, and we got into his minivan, and he took us to the hotel, and we planned what we were going to do the next day. So we got to Severance Hall the next day, and Tom Freer was there and met us, and they started to pull out the cymbals that Joe would use during performances, and he played heavier cymbals. A lot of the orchestras that would use like old Ks and stuff like that. They had workhorse cymbals that were heavy.
Right.
These weren't the jazz cymbals that we think of when we think of old Ks.
Right.
So he actually had a pair of 20-inch Paiste that he paired himself that were two ride cymbals, and one had a larger cup than another. But one of the pair of cymbals that the orchestra had for a long, long time was a pair of K. Zildjians they were probably made 100 years ago or more, and they had the Constantinople stamp on them. And these had Hi Bell in them.
Mm-hmm.
So we really gravitated toward those. We listened to Tom Freer's pair of 18s, and he said, I like Toms, but I like K's a lot. Could you make something like that? So one of the things that you have to do is you have to kind of copy it apples to apples. So I had to have a copy of that bell shape made up. Now, one of the things with really old cymbals made in Constantinople and Istanbul was that none of the cups were the same.
Right.
And the pair that they had at Severance Hall were probably made on the same day because the bells were similar, although they weren't identical, because they were put in with sledgehammers. So a whole stack of blanks would be taken out and put on a mold, and then there'd be two guys with sledgehammers that had a rounded peen on them, and they'd hit, and finally, that's good, and they would stop. So he agreed to send. I don't think we carried the cymbals back. They shipped the cymbals to us, and I brought them to a machine shop that we worked with, and we took measurements, and we had a cupping die made to see if we could, replicate this cup shape. Because if you have the cup shape and then the curvature and the same style of hammering, similar lathing, and you get to the weight, you're about 95% there for sound. Now, this wasn't a small investment on the part of Zildjian. To make a new cupping die could cost upwards of $10,000.
Wow.
Now, we didn't have any reason to use this cup, but having worked with Armin Zildjian for many, many years, he said to try things. And we had an R&D budget. And he said, if it doesn't work in one area, it might work somewhere else. So I did make cymbals for Joe Adato, and we sent a lot of pairs to him. But for some reason, it wasn't clicking with this new cup shape. And he did end up playing a different pair of Constantinoples that he really, really liked. So we still, he was happy, so we were happy. And I decided, well, maybe we can try this cup in something else. So I started to put them in, Constantinople jazz ride cymbals. And as you know about the K Hi Bells, it has that kind of dual type of lathing. It has the full lathing on the outer half toward the edge, and then in the middle it has what we would call spiral lathing. So originally I them just like a regular K Constantinople medium ride, or medium thin low, or medium thin high. But the team at Zildjian didn't think there was enough differentiation between what was in the catalog to this. They're going to say, well, a lot of people aren't going to really notice the bell is different. So can we still get to some certain sound qualities, but make the appearance a little bit different to make this one unique? I said, sure, why not? I'll try.
That absolutely blows my mind, because obviously that's such a huge characteristic of these cymbals, is that spiral lathing. That's really
Yep.
neat.
So, it was kind of like a precursor to the hybrid series, because the Hi Bells came out before hybrid, if I remember. And the great thing about it is that you got the thinner outer portion. We could get a lighter ride sound and easier crash sound. And if you wanted more tight sticking, you could get up closer to the bell. And it worked, and drummers gravitated toward it, and we introduced it. And oddly enough, I have another cymbal here I'm going to hold up. This is a custom Rezo crash, and they have the Hi Bell in it too, the 16, 17, 18 crashes. And for the longest time, I gigged with the 16 and 18. So this bell is the what we would call the K Hi Bell.
Mind blown. That's amazing.
Yep. So
I had no idea it made its way to other cymbals too. That's really cool.
One of the things about R&D is that there's always a trickle down effect. So I'll just segue back to orchestral cymbals for a second. We did some cymbals with Mark Demalakis called K-Symphonics.
Mm-hmm.
And we had started working with Mark when he was subbing in the New York Phil, and now he's the principal of the Cleveland Orchestra. And, he needed some serious workhorse cymbals. So we created this K-Symphonics, and those were the first cymbals that cluster hammering were put in.
Right.
And the reason for that was to interrupt the curvature of the metal, because if you ever take a K and you spin it on your finger, it's not even.
Mm-hmm.
So you have highs and low spots. So it's like, all right, well, how do we get kind of more growl into the cymbal? So we interrupted I say we, it's more like I did it. I took a hammer and put these clusters in it to dirty it up. And that was one of the things that Leon said to me. We were working on these hand cymbals. He goes, they're really, really great sounding, but they need a little bit more growl. Or is there something you can do? And I literally, in the cymbal testing room, there was an anvil. And we had been using it for a doorstop for the longest time. And I grabbed the cymbal and I grabbed a hammer that I had and I flipped it over on this anvil, and I kind of interrupted the curvature and gave it back to him. And he goes, yeah, do more. Wow. And we ended up with 4 cluster hammers in each one, and it really gave it that dark, funky, dirty, growly sound. Yeah. And then those cluster hammer marks ended up being in the Bounce Ride and then the Renaissance Ride. The K-Custom Special dry cymbals have little bits of clusters in them. K-Constantinople Crashes have them. You can't really see them, but it's done just to dirty the sound up just a little bit. So it there's a trickle down effect from one idea over here. Let's see if we can get an effect somewhere else with it. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to water down that technique where everything gets it, because then it becomes just white noise. So it was used where appropriate. So that's where the Hi Bell came from.
That's amazing. So those are 2 different techniques, 2 different things that came both from orchestral cymbals. Do you find that a lot of your development came from the orchestral cymbals and made its way into like the other lines that Zildjian made? And
certainly some of them did, not everything. I'll say that orchestral percussionists are very, very particular on the song colors that they need for the particular pieces that they're using. And if they're trying to replace a pair of very, very old Zildjians, they want it to behave the same way, which is almost impossible to do because you're trying to replicate a piece of metal that's 100 years old, and the bronze changes over time. The metal actually gets harder. Most drummers think that the metal gets softer, but it doesn't get softer. The metal gets harder again. And that's why older cymbals are so much easier to play. If you played a brand new cymbal, so before we got on this, I was lathing cymbals for Drum Center of Portsmouth up in New Hampshire. And if just a regular drummer played those after I was done lathing them, you'd be like, wow, these sound so dull. But in 48 hours, they're going to be ringing like crazy. And that's just part of the process. So the cymbals need to relax, and then they start to do a process called age hardening. But working at a major cymbal company, we learned how to listen to cymbals that were brand new off of the lathing process and know what they were going to sound like. Right. In 48 hours.
He was the tester, right? He'd hold up the glove and test the cymbals.
Yeah, he was one of them. Yep. Yeah, there was another one named Jeff Westhaver, but there was a whole, over the course of my career there were several cymbal testers
the man with the
that were there. So
that could hear anything, right? Any little nuance.
And I also did cymbal testing for a while when I was still a lathe operator. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super crazy. So
we steal. It's like being a drummer. Like I hear a lick that you play, and I steal it from you.
Exactly, right?
Yep.
I think it was Greg Bissonette that said, "Good composers borrow and great composers steal." Right?
Yep. Because I'm never going to play it like you. Like even another cymbal manufacturer might do something that one of their competitors did, but there's a flavor to each cymbal.
Right.
Paiste has their sound, Sabian has their sound, Zildjian has their sound, Meinl has their sound. Um, and, they really don't deviate from that too far afield because there's just a sound overall company sound color that they're shooting for.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing how it's amazing how they're able to do that. You
Mm-hmm.
can hear a Paiste and be like, yeah, that's a Paiste.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Mm-hmm.
nuts. I think, Zildjian definitely had quite the big range of cymbals too, going from the K-cons
Right.
to the Z customs and all that stuff. They're
Oh yeah, sure.
pretty huge range, but I guess all the cymbal manufacturers really do too. But, being a jazz guy,
Cover the gamut.
I always go for the jazz cymbals. So, I did have some more questions. Do you remember
Knock yourself out.
what years? Do you remember what years the Hi Bells were produced from?
So I have the intro and deletion matrix from 1970 until 2020. And I'm just going to flip to, I think it's 2003 that the Hi Bells came out. But let me just look. It was going to tell me when they came out of the catalog too.
Wow.
Okay, so in 2003, that's when the thin high, medium thin low came out. So it was, no, not there yet. Okay, the Hi Bells were introduced in 2005. And let's see, Hi Bell thin high. Yep. So the thin high 20 and 22 were introduced in 2005 and was deleted in 2009.
Wow.
So, and then the other ones, the Hi Bell thin ride low 20 and 22. Again, everything was introduced in 2005. The thin ride low came out in 2008, was removed, I should say, deleted. And then the Hi Bell medium thin ride low in 20 and 22. It says it was still in the catalog in 2020, but I don't think so.
No,
I don't think this was
that's possible.
updated. It might have stayed longer than the others. The
What was
Hi
the
Bell
hardest one?
dry ride
The medium thin low was the hardest one for me to find when I was.
was the most popular. That's why it stayed in the catalog for so long. The
That was
regular K Constantinople medium thin low, that's the number one seller
yeah.
out of all the K Constantinoples. But the Hi Bell dry ride, that was just in 22. So that was from 2005 until 2008. So,
Oh.
and
Now,
again, I know this is pinned because when I worked for Zildjian, I shared it with several forums
I
because
remember
they
seeing
would
it.
call up and ask, and customer service didn't know. And then ultimately I would get a phone call and
Yeah.
I would say, hold on. So when I started to participate on like cymbalholic.com and drumforum.org and some of the others, I just, I got in touch with one of the administrators, or they got in touch with me and said, can we have that? And I'm like, yeah, sure. It's something that was given out at like sales events and stuff. I would bring it with me, and because people had questions, I'm like, here, just take it.
It's fascinating. For these are such interesting cymbals because they deviate pretty far from the K Constantinople line. Like if you put these cymbals up against their regular K-Con
Mm-hmm.
counterparts, they're a very different cymbal.
They're
Do you
not as
remember?
safe. They're not as safe as a regular K Constantinople. Regular K Constantinople, anybody can play.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
these are a little special.
yeah, yeah.
Do you remember what drummers, what artists gravitated towards these cymbals at that time?
Well, right off the top of my head, I know Steve Smith really liked the Hi Bell Dry.
Right.
It's tough for me to remember that far back, the artists that were using them as main cymbals. I mean, just R&D working with artist relations, we would send stuff out. Here's a new sound color and send it out to the people that liked the K Constantinoples to get feedback. And we also took them to stores for sales events and to PAS. That was a great place to get feedback from 5,000 drummers over the course of a weekend, whether or not something was good or not.
So, do you happen to remember or have an idea of what the sales numbers were for these cymbals? Did they sell well? Did they kind of sit? What did they do?
The way that you have to look at these sound colors are that they're a little bit specialized.
Mhm.
much like I'm staring at a framed version of the Dry Complex one here that Bill Stewart signed for me.
Love those.
One of those sound colors is very specialized. So the drummers that like that, they buy it.
Mhm.
And then, the sales kind of take off and then they level off and then they go down. So that's why the cymbals are only in the catalog for, 4 or 5 years.
Oh, that makes total sense, right? Because very few people are rebuying the same cymbal over and over and
Right.
over. Right.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
kind of the problem with drums, I guess, right? Unless you're a serious cymbal collector, then you just have to have one of everything. Kind of like
Right. Right.
I went on a huge Hi Bell binge about right before 2020, and I was just scouring every market. I remember when I first heard them, I didn't like them that much. I thought they were just a little, they were ahead of my years, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then something happened, and I played the Hi Bell medium thin low, or not the medium thin low, the Hi Bell thin low 22.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I played that, I was like, this is the best cymbal I've probably ever played. And it's just got that roar, it's got that sound, it's got clear stick definition, it's got a weird shimmeriness to it that you just don't get from hardly any
Mm-hmm.
other cymbal that's ever been made, I don't think. I can't think of another cymbal that sounds like these. So that in my mind, that's what makes them super special. And they're very versatile too. They're great crashes, they're great rides, they're just everything. So thank you for
The
making them.
medium, you're welcome. And it was just, let's see what happens with this bell in a jazz ride cymbal. Um, and the medium thin lows in general for K Constantinople is a very, very good big crash sound.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of rock drummers that like that too.
I was
So
going to say that's my least favorite of the line is the medium thin low. I like the thin low, the thin
hmm
high. The medium thin low, I used it on some big band gigs. I have a 22 and a 20, and the 22 I used primarily for big band or more like a blues gig and things like that because it was a meatier cymbal than the other thin lows. Did you guys
right,
have
right.
did you have weight specifications that you were going for with each one? And I know this is this other leading into this other question. The medium thin low is not medium. What is it? The medium thin low is not referring to necessarily pitch. It's referring to the bow of the cymbal. Am I correct?
Which relates to it'll have a lower pitch. So a lower curvature cymbal is going to be lower relative to a cymbal that's the same weight that has a higher curvature.
Right. Okay.
So it was medium thin is the weight
Right.
and low is the curvature versus high, and that just gives you different timbres of metal to choose from. Like you don't like the high bell, medium thin, low, but you like the others, so you find the one that makes you feel good and you want to play it, and you buy that one.
Well, I can't sell any of them. I don't. I thought about it. I'm like, nah, I'm keeping all of them. I just like them all too much. They got this sound, So let me
Making
see.
one right now. I'm making one for a customer of Dave's Drum Shop in Ottawa.
Oh,
He contacted me, says, "Can you make a high bell style cymbal?" I said, "Sure."
oh, that's neat.
So I know what the cup shape looks like. So, and he's going to get a hand hammered high bell ride from Cymbal Craftsman.
I might need one of those too. So
Well, let
when
me
you
let me. I'll let you know how this one comes out first before you order one.
okay, now when you do this now, since you don't have the access to those dies, do you
Mhm.
then you have to hand hammer that bell into shape, or how does that work?
Yep. So I get kind of a general purpose cup shape from the factory in Turkey that I buy the blanks from,
Mhm.
and it allows me to hammer it up or leave it where it is. It's very close in shape to the bell that would be in like a Renaissance ride.
Okay.
Yep. Um, or the bounce ride. The bounce ride and the Renaissance ride have the same bell in it. Even if you put them up next to each other, you're going to say nope. The bounce ride cup is smaller, but it's not. It's just laid differently, so it's an optical illusion. It's the same. Trust me, it's the same bell because I designed both cymbals. Um,
Now, with the bounce ride, and this is just me nerding out, right? So I know there was some initial Kenny Washington prototypes that had a different bell shape. Is that correct?
no,
No.
no.
Okay, so it was all the same bell.
Again, do you want to know this story? You'll dig this story
I would
because
love it.
it wasn't the bounce rides that are on the market in the marketplace weren't supposed to ever be seen by Kenny Washington. Um, so he Kenny had this old K that he got from Mel Lewis.
Right.
Mellows was giving him a hard time at a gig going, just ride cymbals sounds like shit. And Kenny goes, well, why don't you give me one of yours? So Mel did. And he played it forever. And then it started to crack at the base of the bell. So Kenny had sent it to several Turkish cymbal makers. And what he got, he said, was good, but it wasn't a copy of his cymbal. So it was, who was it? Rodney Green, protege of Kenny Washington's, said, you got to send it up to Zildjian. And Kenny said, why would I do that? The Turks couldn't make it. So what makes you think that Sabian or Zildjian or whoever's going to be able to do it? He says, just do it. So Rodney Green actually called me and he says, we're gonna send the cymbal up to you. So I got the cymbal and Leon and I evaluated it. And I took all the specs off of it. And again, the cup shape that was in that cymbal, we didn't have anything close to it. So away I went. And then I actually had to go through 3 renditions of the bell. Because the first time that it was made, it wasn't quite the right shape. We did a second one. Nope. Third one. Yep. Very, very close. So I made some prototypes and I told Kenny that they were ready, and he came up. He and Rodney came up to the factory, and I had cymbals set up on drum sets in the drummer's lounge. And he came in and he started to play, and he's like, so how do you do this? How do you copy a cymbal? So I picked one up, and I said, you have this type of cup shape. Here's the curvature. The hammering is random or whatever, and all over the place. And then your bottom is laid more like an A Zildjian, and the top is laid like kind of a 50s K. So that's what I did with all of these. And I was holding it up and I was, doing this with my hand and explaining. He took a step back and he goes, you're fucking crazy. He goes, who thinks about cymbals like this? And I said, well, cymbal makers do. I do. But in order to get close to the sound, you have to try to copy this exactly as close as you can. Now, there's a lot of things that you're not going to know what they did that particular day and that particular group of guys that touched that piece of metal, but you can get pretty close and get, the same feel and sound characteristics. So he picked out some that he liked. He says, I'm going to go play them on gigs. So he did. I didn't hear from him for a year. Sometimes no news is really good news, because when drummers don't like things, they tell you right away.
Right.
So he called up a year later and he said, I've been playing the prototypes and they're good, but they need something else. I need them to be darker. And I said, okay, there's a couple ways we can do that. I can lower the curvature to make them a little darker, or I can lighten them up and we can keep the curvature of your original. And I forgot that Kenny plays with plastic tip sticks. So for some reason, the brand new cymbals that I made, they were just a little bit too much for him. So he wanted some more darkness and growl in there. So I had made up a bunch more prototypes, lower curvature. One was lighter. Mm-hmm. And then I had some left over. I think I had 10 of each, and I had 4 cymbals left over. And I said, you know what I'm going to do just for shits and giggles? I'm going to cluster hammer these just to see what happens, just for my curiosity.
Yeah.
And I did all of that, and I left him in the drummer's lounge, and he came in a couple days later, and I brought him and Rodney down to the drummer's lounge, and I said, just hang tight 5 minutes. I got to go out to the factory. One of the guys out there needs my help, and I'll be back no more than 5 minutes. So I was gone, and telling a drummer not to touch a pile of cymbals is like asking a kid to hold a lollipop and don't eat it. Right. So I came back, and guess which ones he was playing? He was playing the ones with the cluster hammer marks. And there was only 4 of them. And he goes, that's it. We're done. This is the sound. Wow. And I say, wait a minute, timeout. Let's supposed to show you those. Those were like, backups to the backups in case, what I had made wasn't working. And he goes, oh yeah, I just picked up a couple of those and put them on stands, and that's it. That's the sound and the feel. So I said, all right, let's make sure this isn't a fluke, because there's only 4 cymbals. So I took the others out to the factory, and I by hand put in the same amount of clusters. Wow. And brought them in, and he said, no, it does it. Everything works. This is what I want. So that's how the bounce ride happened, and it wasn't supposed to. Can you imagine if I threw up the others and never, never even mentioned the ones
Yeah,
um, that were in that small pile of four.
that's incredible.
So sometimes the universe is good and takes care of things for you.
Yeah, I think those
So
bounce rides are some of the best sounding cymbals that Zildjian ever produced.
yeah,
I've had a couple in my life, and I, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like the earlier versions are different than the later versions. I think they got a little bit heavier. I had a 2,500 gram one that it just looked different than the earlier.
no,
No,
no, same guys. There's only like one or two guys in the factory that lathe those.
okay.
And then the hammering is hammering because it's CNC hammering. So no,
But the design never
um,
changed on it. Okay, because the one I had later, it was heavier. It was in the 2,500 gram range, and it
mhm.
was unbelievable. It was such a great symbol. I really loved it. But yeah, well, man, what a great story. It's so neat to hear how those things came to be. Especially when you're working with artists to create a sound and you do it. That's just insane.
Let me speak to the weight thing a little
Okay.
bit. Okay, so there's a weight range for the bounce rides. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but let's say it's 5 pounds, 8 ounces to 5 pounds, 12 ounces. Now, if for some reason the blanks got rolled in the factory and they got rolled 1,000 thicker than they were supposed to,
Mhm.
um, you don't scrap out the whole oven. You make the batch of cymbals, and then the lathe operator is supposed to bring it down to the weight. Now, if the finished lathe operator, who's the guy lathing the top side of the cymbal, if he lathes it and everything looks good and feels good, and he puts it on the scale and it's a half an ounce or an ounce heavy, he's not lathing it again. He's throwing it on the cart. And it's really up to the cymbal tester to say, whoa, 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 this is too far out of spec for sound for that model. And we either have to relathe it, or I'm gonna reject it and scrap it and cut it up essentially. But there's other things that are a factor too. When people think cymbals, or drummers think cymbals are heavy, sometimes really stiff cymbals, they they play heavy even though they're not weight wise heavy.
Right.
And you could have some heavy cymbals that have a lot of give to them, that people are like, oh man, this thing's really light, and it's not.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot more factors that go into it just than the gram weight.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, So, you might have had one that was on the heavy end of the range because there's an upper and lower limit,
Right.
so you don't want to get too light because then the cymbal gets mushy. If it's too heavy, then you'll lose some of the darkness and growl of what that model is.
Right.
It's too pingy, it's too pretty.
Right.
Um, but you have to remember, a sound color was developed. It's not a manufacturing process that you're buying. You're buying a sound.
Right.
So that's kind of where it is. So you probably had one on the heavier end
Right.
of the weight spec.
Well, and to speak to that too, there's the Cindy Blackman ride, right? The K dark. What was that one? The
Medium.
dark. Yeah, that's a beautiful
Don't tell
symbol.
anybody that's a K Constantinople too. It just wasn't marketed that way.
Oh,
It's
I
hammered
know.
just like a K Con.
Yeah, I've had a couple, and I was just like, this is a K Con, but it's cheaper. I will take it.
Yep.
Those are amazing. So,
That
all right.
was that was an interesting project. Sorry, I'm going to go down rabbit holes.
Oh,
So
please,
she
no, please do.
she called up and said, I need a 22-inch ride that I can play with Lenny Kravitz and straight ahead stuff. And I
Right.
said, oh, so you're like, no problem. You want something that can do everything? And she said yes. So there were some hammering techniques developed so you could have a heavy cymbal, but it had give to it, because that's fairly heavy
Yeah.
for a 22. You're up in the, geez, I'm trying to remember. It was probably 6 to 6.5 pounds.
Right. And I
Um,
remember mine being right around 3,000 grams, which I think equals about the same.
yeah,
I know you deal
yep.
in pounds and ounces.
Well, I do the grams. I have to convert, because I grew up doing pounds ounces for 30 plus years,
Right.
and from when I see grams, it doesn't really it's I can't translate it right away.
Right.
So I just, if you got grams, you get 3,000 grams, divide it by 28.35, and you get ounces, and then divide that by 16s, and you got pounds.
There it is. It's just
So
math, right?
there it is. So um, that was a nice multi-purpose cymbal.
Yeah.
So if some of the hammering techniques weren't done to it, it would sound like a 22-inch rock ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a very, very versatile cymbal. And actually, speaking to Cindy Blackman and heavier cymbals and stuff, I just have a question for you. This is just curiosity. At your time at Zildjian, were you able to did you ever get to see the Nefertiti ride or
Oh, did
try
I
and
get?
copy that? Or
I had the Nefertiti ride in my office for 10 years.
ah! Oh my goodness, are you kidding me?
So it was Vince Wilburn. At one point in time, some discussion about doing kind of a tribute ride with that. And I'm not sure, I wasn't on that side of the business with the marketing and sales and legal stuff, but the discussions, fell through. Um, but I had seen that ride and had made some copies of it early on. Um, and then Zildjian decided not to do it. And then Wallace Roney, who is a protege of Tony Williams and Miles Davis's, he was in the Boston area, and he called up and he said, "Hey, I want to come in with my drummer." And for the life of me, I can't remember that drummer's name, and I'm not going to remember. Um, they came in and he wanted some cymbals made kind of along those lines. So I made some stuff based off of my memory and some notes that I had. And then some years later, Wallace came back in and he was with Lenny. Lenny White was playing with him, but Lenny wasn't a Zildjian artist any longer. But that ride came in with Wallace, and I had played it before it was cracked, and Lenny was playing it on a gig and it cracked in the middle.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that you really couldn't hear the crack. There wasn't a rattle in it yet. So again, took a look at that, took some more notes, and then a few more years went by, and then Wallace and Vince Wilburn, who's Miles Davis's nephew and also is a Zildjian artist, they came in with a bag of cymbals, and Vince said, "Oh yeah, we brought some old K's in for you to check out." And I went through the bag and I pulled out. I got to the Nefertiti right. I said, "Really? What? What are you testing me? Like I wouldn't remember this sound?" Because when we were developing the K Constantinople jazz rides at Zildjian, I came home from work every day and listened to Nefertiti on my stereo because the cymbal is so high in the mix.
Yeah.
You could really hear it. And I mean, we're going back, the K Constantinople rides came out in 1998, 1999. So this is pre find everything on the internet. If you had a computer, you were AOL dial up and forget it. There was nothing really
Remember,
to
yeah.
find. So you had to listen to records and CDs, kids.
Yep.
So we started to talk about that cymbal again, and Wallace, it belonged to Wallace. Tony Williams gave it to Wallace. It was Wallace's cymbal now. And he says, "If I leave that with you, can you make some copies?" And I said, "Sure." So I did. I actually have a copy of it in my possession. And again, I resurrected the idea that Zildjian do something with it. And there was just too many roadblocks, which I won't get into on why it couldn't happen, why it didn't see the light of day. But I just kept it in my office, and I would just bring it up at, product development meetings every once in a while. Like, we could do this. This could be a limited edition. It could do this. It could do that. So I have a picture, and I'll text it to you after we're done, with me and Wallace and Vince holding the cymbal. Wow. And so Wallace was on tour, and this was 2019. This was right before COVID. This was like September of 2019. He was in the Boston area, and he said, "Listen, hey, can I get the cymbal back, seeing as, it's not going to go anywhere?" And I said, "Yeah, and he said, "Will you do me a favor? Will you make me some copies again? Will you make me a 20, a 21, a 22, a 23, not a 23, a 24, but I ended up making a 23 as well." So I gave him all these sizes and returned the cymbals. The original cymbal when he was playing at Scullers in Boston. So we got everything back, and I'm really really happy that I returned that cymbal to him, because 5 months later he passed away. When COVID hit and nobody knew really what was going to happen, some people that had other issues, you would catch the virus and the other stuff that you had going on in your system already. It wreaked havoc on people's bodies, and unfortunately he passed away. It was very very sad. I remember Vince Wilburn calling me saying, "Hey, Wallace is in the hospital. He's not going to make it." I'm like, that's not news you want to hear.
No, no.
Um, but I was very happy to get that back, and his wife has the cymbal now. So
Wow.
yeah. So anyway,
That's cool. It's great.
so
That's
yes, to answer your question, I could have just said yes. Do I know the Nefertiti ride? Not only do I know it, I had it in my office for the
no,
longest time.
that is just incredible. That is such a neat thing. I spoke with Mike Clark about it a few times. I've spoken with a number of people about the ride for a bunch of times, and a lot of people say that if you played it, you wouldn't like
You'd
it.
be like, yeah, you'd be like, not that you wouldn't like it. You'd be like, oh, really? This is the one that he played on Nefertiti?
Yeah.
But
Well, if you didn't know it,
if
like
oh yeah,
like it wouldn't be one that you picked, is what Mike said. So, which is kind of
no,
funny.
you that one didn't stick out like wow, you know.
Yeah.
Tony heard it obviously, and he said I'm going to use it, on these recordings.
Yeah.
And when I played it, I'm like, that's the Nefertiti ride. That's clearly it. But if you had a stack of cymbals and somebody was looking for that, quintessential, you know, old K ride that, unicorns are popping out of it while you're, playing up tempo swing, you wouldn't pick that one
Right.
because
That's
it had some darkness in it. There was some fighting overtones,
mm,
but you listen to that recording and you're like, wow,
yeah.
all right. Yeah, it worked.
Do you
Some
remember the age of that symbol? Like what era it was made in?
so I don't do the trademark stamps. I'm not well versed in the K Zildjian stamp eras. I'm more well versed in the manufacturing.
Right.
So I can tell you when a K was made based off of the hammering and lathing and the cup shapes and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So from my experience of playing a lot of old Ks and people saying, drummers telling me when they bought them or how they acquired them. That was a mid to late 50s K Istanbul or
Wow.
Istanbul K Zildjian. Um, when you look at earlier made with the Istanbul trademark, and especially the Constantinople stuff, anything that has a Constantinople symbol yesterday before our Zoom today, and you'll see the lathing is much much smoother and tighter,
Right.
and the finish almost looks shiny, like it was brilliant finish.
That's exactly
But
what that was.
they didn't make polished cymbals in Turkey. What that is that's a layer of patina that developed over time and filled in very very shallow hills and valleys in the lathing.
Wow, that's nuts.
So um, so the lathing was smoother up into the 40s to early 50s, and then it changed over. And oddly enough, Armin Zildjian said this to me one day. He goes, yeah, Fred Gretsch told them over at K Zildjian to lay the cymbals more like an A, so there'd be more confusion, and they would sell more K Zildjians because the American Zildjian company was selling 10 to 15 A's to every one K Zildjian being sold.
Wow.
So they started to put tonal grooves in
Right.
the cymbals.
Wow.
So um,
Yeah.
so
You're
yeah, I would say mid 50s, late 50s for that cymbal.
That's great. And
And
you're
the
I want
cup
to
shape was lopsided.
right. Yeah, most of it was just going back to that anvil strike, right? None of those symbols were ever
Right.
perfect.
And
So
that's
going
the
back to kind of
beauty of the sound.
oh yeah, no, it absolutely
Good
is.
one. The good ones are really, really good. They were more, and I hate to say it, people are going to say that I'm a heretic. They were more bad ones than they were good ones, and the reason we know the good ones is because they're on the recordings.
Absolutely.
And you talk to any jazz drummer that's been around for a long, long time will tell you the same thing.
Right.
You had to go through a lot of Istanbul Ks to find one that had really good balance.
Totally.
Adam Nussbaum had some. Billy Drummond has really, really great old Ks that he still records with, but doesn't gig with for fear
Right.
that they'll get damaged. Jeremy Stacy, I don't know if you know that name. He has probably one of the largest collections of old Ks. He's a drummer, producer, play with Sheryl Crow and stuff, but
Oh,
he's probably got one of the largest drum and cymbal collections I've ever seen.
wow.
He has some really, really great old Ks.
That's really cool.
So
So
sorry I
going,
keep interrupting you with
oh, no
my
problem. But
stories.
I wanted to say, going back to the history of all this, you did a great podcast with the drum history, uh, Bart, right? I
Oh,
believe.
with Bart, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was just a really amazing drum history podcast. So I want to make sure that you guys out there go check out that if you want to learn more about the history of Zildjian and going back. There's scandal in it. It's a riveting story, right?
It's like a soap opera.
It
Um,
is. It's amazing.
I did get one thing wrong, and I didn't know it until after I did it with Bart. It had to do with the split between Armin and Bob, and how Bob ended up with that Zildjian factory up in Canada. And I'm not going to spoil it. Go find Andy Zildjian's podcast. I think with Bart,
Okay.
and he talks about it.
I'll try and
Um,
find it and link it below here. So,
yeah, so
wow, that's really cool.
it was very, very interesting. And there's some stuff out there too with Billy Zildjian. He had done some interviews, and there's good snippets of information. Like I learned one thing, that when Avitus Zildjian III and his uncle Aaron were making cymbals in Quincy, um, and that's the town that I grew up in, Quincy, Mass. I grew
Right.
up about a mile and a half from the original Zildjian factory. Um, that they were essentially making cymbals for the U.S. government, for the marching bands, for the Army and the Navy and Marines. And Billy told this story about how, the dance bands, this is pre-big band, dance bands were coming up, and that he and his uncle decided that Avitus was going to take some cymbals into I think it was the Statler Hotel in Boston, to one of the ballrooms. People went out to go dancing
Right.
to like an orchestra. And so he shows up, and there's no cymbal bags back in the day per se. So he's got a suitcase with some cymbals in it. And he gets there early, and the drummer is setting up, and he goes up to the drummer and he says, I want to be a drummer like you. I have some cymbals that my friend gave me. Well, these cymbals work with the style of music that you're playing. So he was doing some stealth R&D. So,
Right.
the drummer went through the cymbals that Avitus and his uncle had made, and the drummer said, slam the case shut, and said, don't waste your time with these, kid. Get yourself some Zildjians,
Wow.
meaning,
That,
Zildjians from Turkey. And little did he know who he was talking to.
right.
And then the story goes on about Avitus working with Gene Krupa, and Gene saying, listen, the cymbals are too heavy. These are great for marching or orchestral use, but we can't accent and phrase on these with the music that we're playing. So you need to make them thinner. And Avitus, wanting to make cymbals that sell,
Right.
he created the paper thin cymbal.
Wow.
And
That's really neat.
it's, we really, as drummers, because I've been playing for 45 years now, we have him to thank for how cymbals are made right now.
Yeah.
If he didn't do the stuff that he did, cymbals would have just, been made the way that they were made, and not a lot of feedback back to the factory in Turkey from the end user.
Right.
So, would somebody have done it? Probably,
Right.
but he's really the father of the modern day cymbal.
That's incredible.
And then Armin and Bob carried that tradition on. So, you know, and we're really now in a renaissance of cymbal makers, and
Yeah.
I'm included in that group too now.
Absolutely, and speaking to that, I mean, as a cymbal nerd, like I mean, it's so crazy that we have so many great cymbal makers that are available for
Mm-hmm.
us to say, hey, I would like a copy of this, or I'd like, make something that you love and I want that,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do that. Before, I mean, it's really just a handful. I mean, obviously Roberto Spizzichino and Mike Bettis and I'm forgetting others, but there were
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
a few cymbal makers, and now it's just exploded, and everybody's putting out such great work, and it's all different, and everybody's got their
Hmm.
voice. It's just like music, right? Any art form.
It's just like music. When I became part of the independent cymbal makers, I was invited to join a Zoom call, much like today's. And it was, I don't know how many months ago it was. It might have been 6 or 8 months ago. And it was Dave Collingwood who kind of put the thing together. And they were grateful that I decided to keep making cymbals. They're like, you kind of uplifted this whole community. I said, hey, having worked for a major cymbal company and having talked to employees from other cymbal companies, we've been paying attention to you guys.
Yeah.
We didn't dismiss you. We would pay attention and check out what you were doing. And there was one independent guy, and I won't mention his name because it doesn't really make a difference. He's like, oh, there's so many of us now that the business is going to be less for us all. I said, I live in Plymouth, Massachusetts now. And when I go down to downtown Plymouth, there's a good 20 or 30 restaurants, and they're all thriving. So, you know, put out what you think is the best cymbal that you can make and what the drumming community wants, and people will buy it from you. It's not, we're not competing from the same, pond.
Right.
We're making cymbals for the world if people contact us.
Yeah.
So you have to have a broader look at it. And just like drumming or people that make music or people that paint, you do it because you have to. I'm still making cymbals because I need to make cymbals. It's in me. It's what I do.
Man. Yeah.
I didn't know anybody would want to buy cymbals from me. And Steve Maxwell got wind of an Instagram post that I made. What's the date today? Today is the
March
14th.
14th. Yeah.
March 14th. So around a year ago, I just posted a picture of a hammered blank up against an anvil. And
I remember
the
that
internet almost broke. And Steve contacted me. He goes, "You're making cymbals again?" He goes, "What do you got? Send me a list." And he says, "I want them for the Chicago Drum Show."
Wow.
And that was nice because I was just kind of in my woodshed.
Yeah.
I was kind of practicing,
Wow.
practicing my craft so I wouldn't kind of lose the skills that I had.
Right.
And I was, hoping that, people would want to buy them. And lucky for me, extremely lucky that people are interested.
Oh,
Um, and,
absolutely.
sometimes there's things that come my way and either I don't do it or I know somebody else that can do it better and I'll point them to a different independent cymbal maker.
That's amazing.
Because I don't ever want to do any work that's going to disappoint somebody.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, it's not about, yes, I need to be paid for my time, but if you want to be a millionaire, don't become a cymbal maker. I'll tell you
Right.
that. Yeah.
Well,
Or a drummer,
yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, you know how to make
What's worse
$1 million
than
playing
telling your
jazz.
parents to, yeah,
Start with
yeah.
two. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Worse than
well,
telling your
that's
parents you want
incredible.
to be a drummer, tell them you want to be a cymbal maker.
Yeah. There you go. Wow, that's it. I mean, shoot, that's just an incredible story. So, you have a new company that you just announced. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the actual company name is Royal Cymbals. And it's kind of a play on, everybody is drumming royalty to me and my business partner, Sarah Hagan, who also worked for Zildjian for 16 years. And we enjoyed working together, during our time there. And we wanted to continue it. And because of some contractual obligations, that couldn't happen until this year. So, cymbal craftsman, selfish plug. Um, that's a brand within Royal, and I was able to start making cymbals and use this as kind of the hand hammered, handcrafted, special order, custom shop, um, branded cymbal sound. You know, and within Royal, there's going to be another sound color that will probably be a little bit cleaner and brighter. and hoping to have some of those cymbals all ready to show at the Chicago Drum Show in May. So fingers crossed.
That's awesome.
That everything comes together. I've been doing some prototyping, because everybody doesn't gravitate toward the hand hammered kind of, jazzy sound. And can you make a brighter sound hand hammering? Of course you can.
Right.
But there'll be a differentiation between the two. But the name of the company is Royal. And I will send you the logo for that as along with the Cymbal Craftsman logo, so you have it for the podcast. So there is a website, royalcymbals.com, and we announced the company name and the launch of the company, and there's a website, but there's no product up on it because I'm in the middle of making product, so we can take pictures and load them on the website.
Right.
So everything that I've been doing has been made to order. So if a drum shop orders, then I'll order the blanks and I make them. So I don't have any inventory to take pictures of. But the stuff that I'm in the middle of making for Steve Maxwell's and Drum Center of Portsmouth, Round Sound Cymbals out in Oakland, California, Dave's Drum Shop up in Ottawa. Those are the 4 shops that have stuff on order right now. But there's like 8 dealers that sell Cymbal Craftsman. Please check out all of these stores, these brick and mortars. They're all on the internet. They all have great sound files if you're interested. But we have to. I grew up going to a brick and mortar drum store, DeCenzo's Drum Shop in Quincy, Massachusetts.
Nothing like
Please, and I know everybody gets on the internet now, but support them. You want to keep these guys in business because there's going to be a day you're going to be in, New Hampshire, and something's going to break and you're going to need a part, and you want that store to be something you can walk into, or Memphis, or, Columbus Pro Percussion, or Dave's Drum Shop, or, wherever.
Yeah.
I can name off all kinds of, Pro Drum Shop out in LA.
Skips Music here in Sacramento.
Skips Music. You don't, if you happen to be playing somewhere, let's just say, you're doing a birthday party. I did a birthday party in Nashville for a friend of mine, and I was lucky enough that I had a drummer friend living there that, lent me his kit. So can you imagine if you shipped a kit down and like a drum head broke or something, your bass drum pedal broke, you're not going to get on, the internet and get a bass drum pedal in a couple hours for the gig. You're SOL. Yeah. So you want to be able to walk, Forks Drum Shop in Nashville, or Nelson's,
Right.
You want to be able to walk in these places.
That exact scenario
Did it happen to you?
Well, yeah, it happened to me when I was working on a cruise ship. It was years ago when you had to bring your own kit on the cruise ship, and I flew up to Alaska, of all places.
Oh, God,
got there, set up my drums, and my bass drum pedal spring snapped.
Yep.
And I was out of luck. I mean, I basically had to figure out a way to get that spring to just attach enough, and I was able to play the bass drum really, really quietly.
Wow.
And I just turned up the mic, and I was able to do it for the first 3 nights of the cruise. It had to last 3 nights, and on the very last moment of the very last tune, before we were in the port with the only port in Alaska in the Inside Passage that had a music store,
yeah,
pedal finally snapped and it was unrepairable. So then I had to go and this is in the 90s, and I paid $250 for a bass level, the baseline Iron Cobra, So, but man, without that store, especially back then, I would have been out of luck completely. So.
Oh yeah, you would have been kicking that with your foot.
Oh yeah.
Instead of playing it with the bass drum pedal. Yeah. But there's again, I can't say it enough. There's a lot of great stores out there, and you want to give them your money. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
And the service is exceptional with all of these stores.
Yeah.
And yeah, they came out and supported me, and I make sure that I direct people. If people call up and say, "Hey, I'm just looking for a 22-inch, Cymbal Craftsman crash ride," I'm like, "All right, well, I just shipped some to this location. Please get on their website." Amazing. I've been making some Bill Stewart style. Steve Maxwell asked for some, and Jim Pettit asked for them for the Memphis store, and I'm like, "Yep, I just shipped 5. Go buy it from them." you
I have a
know,
feeling
because
after this you'll be making him maybe a couple Nefertiti clones.
maybe.
We're gonna have to talk. I might be.
Oh,
So, actually, I do have one final question for you, and this is kind of just out of a curiosity thing. A while ago, I purchased an old K that was new old stock. It was the last of the 1977, had to be one of the very last old Ks that they made before they shut the factory down. And it was part of the Al Mercury collection out of
yeah, I
Quincy,
went through that
Mass.
collection. Yeah, I went through that collection with Leon.
I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that. 'Cause I
About
didn't know much.
his collection. So I it, so is it? I was calling him Al Mercury, but that's probably not the right way to pronounce it.
I don't know.
Um, so I don't remember we met with and who was curating the cymbals for him,
Right.
but we went down to see if we could put some cymbals together that maybe Craigie Zildjian would want to purchase, you know, because part of the history of her company, you know,
Right.
of the Zildjian company. And the prices were up there, I would say, but Al was friends, if I remember correctly, with Armin Zildjian, so he had access to a lot of stuff.
Right.
But he had old Ks, he had new Ks, he had old As. He had a 26-inch swish that I had never seen in person before. So he had a lot of old Istanbul Ks that were thin, matched to modern day Ks for hi hats.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
he did that on his own. But there was good cymbals. I think we picked out 26 or 30 cymbals potentially to purchase. And the company didn't end up doing it because they would have just been on display, and the prices that were being asked were very expensive. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
So, but the collection was nice, you know, and like anything, you know, there was some really, really exceptional sounding cymbals, and then there was some duds
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
But we spent, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours there going through stuff and checking stuff out.
Wow, that's cool.
So, and he
I
and again, he had old stuff and he had brand new stuff. He had some, you know, A Zildjians from the '70s that, you know, people are gravitating away from now, and they sounded pretty. You know, they
yeah,
sounded like, you know, if you listen to Aerosmith records or Boston albums or stuff, that was a quintessential Zildjian sound at the time.
absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah. So tell me about your cymbal.
Well, that one was I don't have it anymore. I did sell it a little while ago, but it was a 22. It was in the 2,300 gram range, and it was
Mm-hmm.
stamped thin, which I had never seen before. Because normally, when you got the old case, they were all medium or heavy or medium heavy or something, you know. But this one had the thin on the underside, the 22, and then in centimeters, and then thin, and it was a beautiful cymbal. I was the first person really to play it, besides
Some
the
brand
person.
new stuff, yeah.
Brand new
Well,
old K.
well, you know, the
Unbelievable stuff.
American firm owned that factory. That's how they got the
Yeah.
K Zildjian back. They they couldn't they couldn't get Fred Gretsch to negotiate anymore, so Avidus the third could buy the trademarks back. So actually, Bob Zildjian went over to Istanbul and talked to the cousins and
Mm.
bought the factory from them.
Wow.
And again, hopefully, I'm not butchering this story, but now that Avidus the third owned the factory, that, you know, his part of his birthright,
Hmm.
they went back to Gretsch and said, "Yeah, keep the trademarks. You're not going to get any more cymbals."
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
because Gretsch owned, they registered the K Zildjian trademark. Probably it was in mid 20s, 1920s,
Mhm.
um, and that's why they had control of the trademark.
Wow.
And but they didn't have any control over the factory.
Yeah.
So, um, so Avidus through Bob said he was sick of hearing his dad complain about the cousins and they shouldn't be making cymbals. They're not real Zildjians, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So he bought the factory, went back to Gretsch and said, you know, keep the trademarks. You're not getting any more cymbals. And it forced them back to the table. So they got exclusive distribution rights for 10 years, for
Mm.
another 10 years, but all trademarks went back to Zildjian.
So
And I had in my office at Zildjian, I had all the original A Zildjian trademarks, the Avidus Zildjian trademarks,
you mean the
from
stamps themselves, right?
yeah,
Wow.
from the 20s all the way up until Zildjian started to laser engrave the
Right.
cymbals. And there was even one in there that was used on the Canadian Ks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because the Ottoman writing in that trademark from the Canadian cases, it's not as fluid. It's
Right.
kind of clunky
Yeah.
looking. Um, so yeah, and so they bought the factory, and then they implemented some things that were improvements. So the curvatures got a little bit more even. The bells weren't all wonky anymore.
Right.
So the cymbals sounded cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that was a perfect
so
description of what mine sounded like. It
yeah.
was like a perfect K.
Hmm.
like because it had to be one of the last ones. I mean, there was still like I remember on the stamp, you could still like almost brush off, that top part of the symbol that's still a little rough. Like
Hmm.
it was so cool. It was a neat thing to just be able to have for a little bit, at least in my presence. So you know what,
That's
that
awesome.
brings me to another thing that I wanted to say thank you for doing when you did it. The Avidus line, when you guys reintroduced that, you put the old trademark on those and then laser
Mm.
inscribed the serial numbers, and I thought that was such a cool touch for those symbols.
I had to fight for that. I
I
had
bet.
because they're like, we're not going to have any serial numbers on there, and how are we going to trace it? And what about returns and stuff like that? And I said, listen, we have to make these look as authentic as they can. So I said, well, we were putting a trademark in the low volume symbols.
Mhm.
And if you know the low volume symbols with all the holes in it, there was only a strip of solid metal out on the edge, and that's where the trademark went.
Okay.
So I said, okay, we can serialize the Avidus, but we'll put it on the bottom, at the base of the bell, and we'll use the same trademark that we use for the low volume. So it's serialized with the batch number, what number it was in the batch. And then we could roll the old stamp in. So funny enough, I took the box of stamps down to Leon. I said, okay, which a Zildjian stamp would be closest to the 1950s? Because there were like 3 or 4 Avidus Zildjian trademarks, and they were all being used in the vault. And I'm going to segue to that reason in a minute. So he goes, that one would be closest to probably what was being used when I started in 61.
Mm.
So you can't really date a Zildjian, an American-made Zildjian from the stamp, unless it's uh, late 20s, early 30s, maybe 40s, because they were 2 different stamps and they didn't sit right. But the one that says Avidus Zildjian made in USA and it looks perfect, and sometimes it has the 3 dots, sometimes it
Sometimes not.
doesn't, sometimes it has a slash. They were all being used in the vault.
Hmm.
So there was a good amount of cymbal testers that picked orders. There was probably 4 or 5 guys. So instead of fighting over one trademark machine, um, the cymbals didn't get trademarked until after the order was picked to go to the store or the distributor. Okay. So cymbals could have been made 3 years ago and been sitting on the shelf. And once they got picked, after you picked the order for that store, you would go and trademark it. And whatever trademark machine you were closest to is the one you use, because they all said Avidus Zildjian. But they weren't all engraved exactly the same way. So that's what the little differences are.
Gotcha.
So from 1929 until 1968, all A Zildjians were hammered on the underside. Okay, so they were bumped into a rough shape, flipped over, and they were hammer rows put in with essentially a power hammer. Okay, and then Zildjian started to do some R&D where they pressed the blank into shape, and then they started to hammer on the top. And the first cymbals they did this with were hi-hat cymbals.
Mm.
So in 1968, you'd start to see hi-hat cymbals with the hammering on the top side, and then it segued into all the other models. Okay,
Okay.
so I'll answer questions on the different forums, or someone says, hey, this is this stamp, and I'll say, but it wasn't made then. It was made in the 1970s.
Right.
You know, and I I
You can
remember
tell just by the way the symbol was
this.
manufactured,
It
right?
was
You can see
made,
the
yeah,
difference. Yeah.
because the lathing changed, the cutting tools that they used changed. And if you can see distinct hammer marks on the top side of the cymbal, that's a 1970s symbol, 1980s, 1990s. Laser engraving didn't start until 1994.
Right.
Okay,
Wow,
so
that's incredible.
that's when the rolled stamp stopped. And funny story, I was answering a question on I don't know, it was like a Facebook group, and there's just some random, you know, part-time drummer who was really a plumber started to argue with me about, no, you're wrong, it's this, blah blah blah. And I just backed up, and a Zildjian artist got on and said, you just might want to Google his name,
Yeah.
because you're arguing with probably the foremost authority about Zildjian cymbals right now. And the guy's like, I'm too busy. I can't look up who this clown is. You know,
Oh,
I'm putting in a boiler somewhere. And then he did look me up, and then he tell me I was wrong. And I just said, hey, you know, and the other
internet
guys
is a
jumped in
fascinating
and
place.
said, you're playing, if you've bought a cymbal in the last 25 years, you're playing something Paul designed at Zildjian, and he still wouldn't
Nothing.
let it go. And I just said, all right, you know what?
Cool.
So I find those things kind of funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, I think that obviously with Symbolholic, a lot of people decided that you could tell the age because there's, for us lay people who don't know the
Right.
difference between the hammering and everything or can't see it the same way you do. Like
There,
the
there
stamps
is
seem to be
there
the
is some there is some credence to it. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that
Right.
you can't dismiss it at all. I know there was a gentleman named Bill Hartrick that
Hmm.
spent a lot of time,
Absolutely.
but Leon having been at Zildjian for 58 years, he said, listen, there were several trademark machines in the vault and they weren't all engraved the same way. So there's no way you can say this one was made on March 3rd, 1957. It didn't work like that. He said,
Right.
sometimes we'd be making 14-inch thin crashes and they'd sit on the shelf for 5 years.
Wow.
And, Leon would ask Avidus, why you keep making these 14-inch thin crashes? You got like 5,000 of them here. And Avidus said, no, you wait, you'll see. One of these days, they're all going to be gone. They were.
How about that? Yeah.
There was just no way to say, at 8:30 in the morning, you know, April 2nd, 1972, this one was made.
Right.
It didn't work like that. All the cymbals got made. Cymbal tester did a pre-testing. They got put on a shelf
Wow.
and they sat there. And you picked from whatever row of 14s you wanted to pick from. I mean,
Right.
I used to go into the vault and there'd be 2,000 16-inch A custom crashes you could pick from. And, they were made because they knew that those models were going to be purchased.
Right.
Um, so if people get to check out what Bill wrote, it's fantastic.
It is.
But, Zildjian couldn't endorse it because it wasn't bulletproof
Right.
with it,
Not like the
So,
serial numbers now where you can, you see the letters and you know what year
mhm,
it is. And
yeah,
that's
yep,
also like I can put that in the description too. If you're curious about what year
hmm
your Zildjian symbol is, you can look it up by the letters at least
yep,
in
the two
front of the
letters.
serial number. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's a pretty cool thing.
yep.
Some of them are harder to see than others, but I
Well,
know a couple of mine were stamped in a little or etched in or something on like even on my high bells. It's you have to get out the magnifying glass, but it's there.
yeah, yep, yep.
That's
So,
fantastic,
um,
man.
there's a lot of great information out there. There's something about K Zildjians too that I saw not too long ago, and I'm like, do I want to go down this rabbit hole? Because I'm just like everybody else with
All
symbols.
right.
I'm probably the worst symbol holic than you guys, you know,
Probably. Well, you
because
got the golden
I'm
ears too. You can hear it. You listen to it and you're like, oh, I know how that was.
hmm
That's a really cool thing. I mean, that's totally. I mean, that's beyond. I listen to a cymbal. I'm like, oh, that's my sound. That's what I want. And you hear it and you're like, oh, I can hear the manufacturing process in it, right?
hmm
Like
hmm
that's incredible to me. That's so
That's
neat.
that's that's something that's learned.
Yeah.
Some drummers can't get rid of their personal preferences
Hmm.
and what they like for sounds. And if you're going to become a cymbal tester at a major cymbal company, you have to get rid of what you personally like, and you have to say, okay, does this batch of cymbals meet the sound criteria for what it's supposed to be?
Right.
So you have to divorce yourself from what you would play.
Your
Um,
bias, right? What you would like.
yeah, yeah. We had one cymbal tester at Zildjian that would never test the Bill Stewart cymbals. He goes, they sound broken. They sound like we should throw them all away. I can't do
Yeah.
it. And we said, fine, don't test them.
And you know what? Those cymbals were so far ahead of their time. I mean, I remember hearing them at first too, and just thinking, "Wow, this is a crazy cymbal." I've had one, and I mean, I'm a cymbal guy, and I love cymbals, but that cymbal was too hard for me to play in a band setting. The one that I had in particular, it was interesting because I felt the sonic properties of that cymbal covered up too much of the music. And they were all very different too. So not all of them acted the same way. The one that I had was such a great cymbal by itself, but you get it into a musical context, I found myself fighting to hear the saxophone or fighting to hear the piano. And that to me became the reason that I had to eventually just say, you know what, I love this thing, but I gotta get rid of it. I'm sure is that something that you go for when you're making those? Like, how do you,
It was
what is
really up
that?
to Bill.
Yeah.
Bill liked Istanbul Ks that have very high curvature.
Mhm.
The earlier American Ks, the jazz rides were kind of reminiscent of some of those type of cymbals. So, there was a basis for me to go by along with what Bill liked, and Bill had a very sound for cymbals that wasn't in the Zildjian catalog.
Right.
So we designed something that he would play, hoping it would translate. And oddly enough, in the first 6 months of coming out with the dry complex, thin and medium thin, um, Zildjian sold 600 cymbals. I remember that as a fact because it's unheard of. If you sell 200 of a 22-inch model in a year, that's a good year for a 22-inch
Mhm.
cymbal. Um, and
I
I
feel like
had
I
to
buy
ask.
those that many a year sometimes. So how do they not have my name in there?
I had to ask finance several times. I said, "Is that number right?" And they said yes. And there was only supposed to be one model. There was just supposed to be the one that was thin, but it weighed 5 pounds and it was very thin. And Bill said, this is going to work for me and for some drummers, but there's going to be a lot of drummers that can't play this. So we should make one that's just a little bit heavier. And meaning a little bit heavier was a quarter of a pound or four
Right.
ounces. So the thin weighed 5 pounds and the medium thin weighed 5.4, and that's the only Zildjian model. It was that weight. There was no range.
Oh,
If you made the thin, it had to be 5 pounds.
no
If
kidding.
if you were lathing the medium thin, it had to be 5 pounds 4 ounces. It was a little bit heavier, so when we smoothed the edge, it would bring it right down to the weight. But
Yeah.
there was a here's the weight you have to hit, and you
Wow.
can't leave it heavier because it won't sound the right way.
That's crazy.
Um, and again, that was a very, very unique sound, specialized sound. So once everybody bought those, then that was it. It came out of the catalog,
Yeah.
um, and I got yelled at by drummers. Like, I hate you. I'm like, well, why would you hate me? We just met. You designed that Bill Stewart cymbal, and I really like Bill's playing a sound, but I can't play it. I go,
Yeah.
well, sorry, you
Yeah.
know,
No,
and they want to make it work and they can't. And they go, I go see Bill play, and it's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's Bill's touch, I mean, there's so much about like how he holds the drumstick and the sticks he's using, his sound, like just yeah, yeah. I mean, we could get into that for days,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
yeah, no, it's so true. That I would say that's the hardest cymbal I've ever had to try and make work in a band situation. And I mean, you see Bill do it, and you're like, it's possible, but
He used a lot of felts too, so he got a gated sound with it. You
absolutely.
know.
Well,
Yeah.
see the little secrets, right? There's little
Hmm.
things in there. Oh man. Well, I think I think that's it for my questions. Do you have anything else that you want to say or
No, I'm just gonna plug royalcymbals.com,
please?
and you can email info at Royal Cymbals, and we'll get back to you. There's also Sarah at Royal Cymbals, Sarah Hagen, and Paul at Royal Cymbals, and you can continue to contact me at paul at cymbalcraftsman.com as well. All of those email addresses will work, and we get back to you, right away. As long as I'm not covered in lathe shavings like the picture I sent you earlier.
Right.
I will answer you. And one of the
That's
things that I like to do, um, is that if we're going to talk about a specific cymbal sound or something to be made, I like to have a phone call.
yeah.
So now how the artist got treated at the my former employer. Now everybody gets treated that way at Royal Cymbals.
That is unbelievable to me. As a
Hmm.
kid growing up, being able to talk to the people that are making your instruments, that have so much knowledge, that have just this years of experience, so many years, and you can call them on the phone and say, "This is the sound that I'm looking for."
Hmm.
I can't even imagine. I mean, like, what a great time we're living in. So,
Yeah,
Cymbalholics out there, make sure you contact Paul. Check out, just the world of color and the world of sound that's out there musically. And Paul, thank you so
thank
much for
you.
taking this time to talk high bells and whatever else we got into. I mean, we could probably go on forever. So, I
We
really,
could, we could go through, a catalog, or we could talk about what I'm making now, and just, I jokingly say rabbit holes into
oh man.
wormholes, and forget it.
Yeah, well, we'll have to do that again sometime. And I don't know. We'll have to talk about this special project that I mentioned yesterday. So if you want to,
All right.
hopefully we
Yep.
can do
Yep.
that. That'd be a lot of fun. But
Yep.
I wanted to say thank you again, and it's been such a pleasure, such an honor, and I look forward to the next time we chat.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, and we'll talk again soon.